I'd like to begin by telling you a little about Louise Humann, a woman who had a profound effect on Theodore Ratisbonne, the founder of the Sisters of Our Lady of Sion, and on the pedagogy of our schools. Firstly, though, I invite you to travel, in spirit of course, to a beautiful city in France, Strasbourg, in the historic region of Alsace. It's strategically situated on the Rhine River, the border between France and Germany. Capital of the eastern region of France, Strasbourg is in close proximity to 5 neighbouring countries: Germany, Luxembourg, Belgium, Switzerland and Holland. Home to the European Parliament, it has become the symbol of European unity. Two distinctive features of the city are the single-spired Gothic cathedral and the many small bridges over the canals of the Marne River, intersecting the streets. In summer, the bridges are decorated with red geraniums, and at night they're illuminated, making the city quite picturesque, especially at Christmas. Strasbourg is the city to put on your must-see list. It's also where Sion's story begins. Having travelled in spirit to this beautiful city, I'd like you now to travel back in time to the mid-18th century. Sion's educational philosophy began long before the birth of the founder, Father Theodore Ratisbonne. I'd like to begin there. A very erudite, wise and holy woman and a great teacher by the name of Louise Humann is born in 1766, before the French Revolution. She designs a pedagogy and educational philosophy that will, less than a century later, be adopted by Theodore and the first Sisters of Our Lady of Sion, to give a unifying and distinctive character to Sion schools worldwide. In this video, I'd like to tell you something about Louise's life. You'll hear more about how she influenced Sion's pedagogy in the video on Theodore. Reflect for a moment on Louise's words written in 1793. "I believe all children must be allowed to be children, girls and boys, learning to read, write, able to enjoy games, play in fresh air and sunshine, and live happy lives. After all, they are children of a God who loves them and wants them to be happy." Such words may not seem extraordinary to us today. Think, though, for a moment how Charles Dickens describes the education of children in his novels. And Dickens was born nearly 50 years after Louise. Anna Maria Magdalena Humann, who we in Sion know simply as Louise, is the first child of Jacob Humann from a village near Strasbourg and Anna Maria Schmitz, daughter of an immigrant family from Westphalia, Germany. Louise is born in Strasbourg on the 29th of September 1766, 250 years ago. For almost 5 years she's an only child. 11 other children follow. Sadly, only 5 survive, most dying in infancy. Death is a tragic, reoccurring experience for the Humann family, as it is for many at that time. Like most in the city, the Humanns live in a small house with just the bare essentials in 3 to 4 small rooms. Whether the family is Catholic or Lutheran, there's always a statue or a devotional image in a place of honor, known as God's corner in the house. When Louise is 5, she learns to read from a German family Bible, and soon after she's reading French too. From an early age, Louise is bilingual, soon picks up the Alsatian dialect as well. Much to her parents' delight, when she's 7, she's able to name all the physical features on a globe that finds its way into the home. It becomes her favorite play toy. As Louise gets older, she becomes an avid reader, reading anything she can get her hands on. She's especially interested in an article on astronomy that her father brings home, a subject for which she keeps a lifelong interest. Religion plays an important part in the lives of the Catholics of Strasbourg. Louise regularly attends the local catechism classes. Although the youngest, she's ranked first in the final examination. We next hear at 15, she's tutoring her 10-year-old brother, a pupil of the Royal College, helping him with Latin and later Greek. When Louise reaches her teenage years, her father is employed at the Strasbourg Zollkeller, the customs house, a credit to his personal integrity, as all the foodstuffs coming into the city must be checked and assessed for custom tax. The family is able to live on the upper floor with a lot more space than they've ever known before. Aged 22, Louise enters the St. Barbe convent, an enclosed order as were all at that time. But after 15 months, she leaves of her own accord to return home. Feeling rather lost and useless, quite providentially, she meets a dynamic young priest, Father Joseph Louis Colmar, known as Father Louis. He invites Louise to help him in his ministry, visiting prisoners where they are living in deplorable conditions, giving catechism instructions to younger children, and preparing older ones for the sacraments. Louise begins to realize she does have a purpose in life. In 1789, the French Revolution erupts, with many of the people of Strasbourg embroiled in the harsh and chaotic relations with the Church. The civil constitution of the clergy, passed the following year, is devastating news for the clergy, who must swear fidelity to the nation, the law, and the king. If they refuse, they must leave the country, or, if they stay and get caught, they face exile or death by guillotine. Father Louis refuses to take the oath, but will not desert the people. He then becomes a hunted priest. A year or so later, Therese Breck, a widow with 3 children and a newcomer to Strasbourg, meets Father Louis, who introduces her to Louise. The 2 women become good friends. Therese decides to purchase a large house with a garden in Rue Sainte-Elisabeth, on the outskirts of Strasbourg. She invites Louise to live with her and to undertake her children's education. The venture quickly develops into a happy neighborhood school. At a time when only the boys of the wealthy can afford school, Louise opens her school to all, girls and boys. The Elizabeth School is first and foremost a happy place. The children roam freely around the garden, venturing even to run along the nearby ramparts of the military hospital. Occasionally, there are treats in the form of a party or an outing. Louise understands the importance of letting children be children, a principle of education relatively new at the time. The children are taught to read, write, and study elementary mathematics, and in religion classes, Louise presents God as a God of love, not one to be feared. The 10 Commandments she teaches are not just a list of do's and don'ts. Rather, they're signposts from a loving God pointing the way to live happy, free lives. Years later, some of the students speak glowingly of the happy atmosphere Louise creates in the school Elizabeth, where each student is convinced she or he is accepted as an individual person with gifts to be discovered and developed, destined to lead a happy and fulfilled life. From 1793 to 1798, the French Revolution creates a reign of terror in Strasbourg. By late 1793, 31 people, priests or collaborators, have been guillotined in the city's central square. Father Louis uses the Elizabeth House as a base for his underground church. With Louise's assistance, he leaves the house stealthily at night to visit the sick and the dying and to celebrate Mass. Many amusing stories are told of the various disguises he uses to escape the police, always suspicious about the activities of the house. A merchant delivering coal blackened by its dust, or a tradesman with a sack of flour on his back, clothes and face covered in white powder. With unexpected raids, nightly search parties, and a death sentence, should anyone be caught, the trio live nerve-wracking moments of anxiety and fear. An opportunity to leave the city for Turkenstein, a small hamlet in the nearby Vosges Mountains, occurs when Therese purchases an old castle there as an investment. With a sense of deep relief, the trio, Father Leo, Louise and Therese, with 3 excited children, set off to celebrate the Feast of the Sacred Heart, the 15th of June, 1797. The adults solemnize the day by making a pact to devote their lives to the relief of the sick and the education of youth. The pact will continue to inspire them for life. For the first time, Louise signs her name Louise. The next stage in Louise's life takes place when Napoleon comes to power in 1800. Relative calm is restored to France, and Father Louis is named Bishop of Mainz in Germany, an outpost of the newly acclaimed French Empire. A year later, he sends for Louise and Therese to open a boarding school for girls. Both women are completely bilingual, so they move to Mainz, where they can educate the young and remain in contact with Father Louis, encouraging one another to fidelity to their pact. The school becomes known as Institut Josephine, as Napoleon's wife Josephine endows it, regularly visiting the students. The important challenge for Louise is to create unity among the students, French and German, Catholic and Protestant, wealthy and poor. A few early setbacks are overcome, and Louise succeeds in creating a happy family atmosphere where each student is loved as an individual person with unique gifts. The secret of my success in education is to love each student, Louise later attests. She is the heart of the family. No one is pampered, yet each knows she is trusted and will be encouraged to do her best. The curriculum is broad to include 3 languages, German, French and Italian, along with mathematics, art, needlework, music and dancing. Louise is adamant girls can learn as well as boys. Hence she teaches rhetoric and elementary logic, subjects considered at that time to be a male preserve. When the school finances allow it, the two women begin a fund, God's Share, to provide scholarships for poorer students to have an equal opportunity for education. With Louise as principal and Therese a gentle, complementary presence, the school functions very successfully. Louise's educational theory also stresses the importance of students having a thorough acquisition of language. They must feel competent, she believes, in expressing themselves clearly, articulating their hypotheses and questions, to give their opinion on any matter under discussion. Language is the instrument of thought. Without a thorough grasp of language, she states, students will never be able to reason clearly, and without fluency and precision, they will be unable to communicate. Unfortunately, by 1813, Napoleon's defeated troops returning to France via Mainz bring typhus to the city, and the school must be closed. Louise and Therese care for the sick and wounded, while Bishop Louis fearlessly ministers to the dying. We're told that 20,000 soldiers and 2,500 citizens of Mainz die before the epidemic has run its course. Sadly, Bishop Louis catches typhus and, severely weakened, dies a few years later in 1818. With his death and the school still closed, the two women decide to return to Strasbourg. Now, 53 years old and rather disheartened by recent events, Louise wonders what life holds for her. She decides to take a holiday in a German health resort, and there, through family connections, meets a young university philosophy lecturer from Strasbourg, Louis Bottin. Another Louis, so we'll refer to this Louis by his surname, Bottin. He's convalescing after suffering a breakdown from overwork. Louise has herself read widely in philosophy, so the two have some lively discussions, and Bottin is invited to visit Louise in Strasbourg when both return, so they can continue their conversations together. In the meantime, Louise invests in a large house on Rue Toussaint in Strasbourg, where she, Therese, and her children live. Bottin returns to the university. Continuing his philosophical conversations with Louise, the young philosopher finally returns to the Catholic faith. Unfortunately, after a few years, there's hostility in the university towards those who were appointed in Napoleon's era. Bottin is condemned for heresy and dismissed from his lecturership. With Therese's daughters now married, Louise's house has plenty of free space, so she invites Bottin to conduct small philosophy classes there. It is there, at Toussaint, that Theodore, searching for truth and proof of God's existence, joins Bottin's class and meets Louise Humann. Deeply impressed by her quiet, gentle presence, Theodore asks for her spiritual guidance. A year or so later, with the bishop's permission, she baptizes the young Jew. His journey continues to priesthood, after which he joins the community of the priests of St. Louis, whose superior is Louis Bottin. Through a painful theological misunderstanding relating to the role of faith and reason in proving God's existence, the priests of St. Louis lose their priestly faculties and must leave the minor seminary where they've been teaching. At Louise's suggestion, They established their own school system, secondary and junior schools for boys and a girls' school. Louise shares her educational philosophy learned from her experience in Rue, Elizabeth and Mainz with the community, as well as with the many lay men and women teaching in the schools, now part of the St. Louis family. Some of the women teaching in the girls' school know Louise personally and will later join Theodore to become the first sisters of Our Lady of Sion. Much more could be said about Louise. She was certainly a gifted woman with extraordinary talent as a pedagogue. During her life, she herself had learned 5 languages, German, French, Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, to read the Bible in that language. The 13 tomes of her writings stored in the archives in Jouy, outside Paris, reveal the wide range of studies she pursued, including scripture, mathematics, the sciences, philosophy, psychology, astronomy, and Egyptology. More important, however, than all her knowledge was Louise's spirituality based on the Rhineland mystics, a deep love of God and leading others to know and love God. The only imperative in life is to love, she would often repeat. Love is for all times and all places. It is the most fundamental law because God is love. A year after Louise's death in 1837, the St. Louis headmaster, Father de Régny, sums up the goals of Louise's educational philosophy in his report at the prize-giving ceremony. And I quote, "We teachers will have made progress in imparting Louise's pedagogy if we succeed in giving our pupils a taste for serious study, encouraging them to have wide interests that enable them to see things as a whole, the interests of humanity, all parts of the universe, and the wonderful world of nature. All this will widen their horizons, raise them above themselves, and interest them in all that is human and of God."